What is up, YouTubers, gamers and hobbyists? Welcome to this little tutorial where I want to talk a little bit about thinning your paints. Now, this is something which has been talked about for a long time, demonstrated for a long time, but I just want to give my thoughts on the matter. I'm going to use, just for sake of arguments, I'm going to be using Night Lord's Blue, fairly recent paint I bought, and thin it down for literally before your eyes on a Citadel painting palette, one of the paper ones, these things here, just because it's white and I can show you easier. So let's just get to it and we'll talk about it. Okay, so here we are. I've shaken this up. We're gonna get the paint out. I'm going to use a fairly big brush. I'll just to show you. It's literally just to show you. Look, glob of paint on the palette here. And there are many ways you can actually thin this down. Now, my favorite method of thinning paint down is with water. So I dip my brush in water. The best way I find, put it on the palette next to the paint you've just globbed out, then gradually mix it in till you find your perfect, whatever the perfect viscosity you want for your model. And what I can say at this stage is you can't really over thin your paints. I mean, you can. Here's an example of a paint, this actual colour on the back here, where it has actually been thinned quite a bit. The metal is still showing through. The metal of the model is still showing through, but that's where multiple layers come in. So multiple layers doesn't cover up detail. Okay, so let's go on to another method. Once again, get a glob of paint onto the palette. Wash my brush out, because this is something which I see a lot of people do, and I'm not convinced it's the best. A lot of people will use Lahmian medium to thin their paint down. Now, here's the thing. Here's the ultimate thing. This thins your colour down. So when you drag it across your palette, you're thinking, oh yeah, that's ideal. But it does not thin down the medium of your paint. You're adding medium to your paint. So you're thickening the paint. So you are literally making it easier to cover up detail on a model. And some people will apply multiple layers of mediums and glazes across their model, and I can see it literally before my eyes covering up detail, whereas the water, not so much. You can apply multiple thin layers of water. The water will evaporate, dry, and that's it. Done. Your detail's back. Your medium will dry, but it will not evaporate like the water does. It will stay at that thickness. So for me personally, water gets a tick, and Lahmian gets a cross because I don't like using it. There are the odd occasions where I will use it, but for the most part, water is the best way. Now, there is another way you can thin your paints down. You can do all the same sort of thing with an airbrush thinner. You can do this. This is more or less, put a drop down there, look. This is more or less what I would use. Like I say, if it was going for an airbrush, I might want to thin it down with this. or a metallic paint. It's quite handy to thin it down with airbrush thinner in that instance. Again, that kind of evaporates. You don't lose detail. Here you do. So, I mean, at the end of the day, it's entirely up to you what method you use. And yes, you need to thin down your paints, but make sure you're doing it for the right reasons, at the right time, and so on. So I hope that gave you some small insight into how I thin my paints. And work out what's best for yourself, how you thin it. Don't just blindly use mediums. Just, yeah, you know, because if you're painting, if you're doing a lot of painting, a lot of highlights, you'll be using a lot of medium to thin it. Yes, it maintains the flow of the paint, but it does increase the viscosity of the paint as a whole. It does thin the colour, but not the paint. It's still thick. Yeah, water will evaporate. It will dry and evaporate, and that's it, done. That's why I advocate water for thinning your paints for the most part. And I appreciate that there are exceptions to the rule, but that's just my take on it. Thanks for watching. See you on another video. Don't forget, all brushes lead to war. Bye for now. Bye-bye.